Do you recall the blonde beauty who, in the 1990s, burned down the beaches of Malibu? In addition to being the focal point of Baywatch, Pamela Anderson, once an indisputable sex icon, was also the subject of controversies that rocked Hollywood. Beneath the glitzy exterior, there were stormy romances and dark secrets that still astound people. Never before made public, her most intimate images are now gradually exposing aspects of a life Anderson worked so hard to conceal. What transpired behind those alluring eyes? And why is she still a topic of conversation decades later? Continue to observe. This is simply the beginning of the story. Born in Ladysmith, British Columbia, Canada, on July 1st, 1967, Pamela Anderson was brought up by her industrious parents, Barry and Carol, and her older brother, Jerry. However, beneath her family's serene, unassuming facade was a disturbed and unfinished childhood. Her father battled alcoholism, and his protracted drinking sessions caused instability and emotional detachment in their small household. While Pamela was still a little child, her mother had to work non-stop to provide for the family, teaching her early on how to cope with ongoing anxiety. Her early years were filled with suffering and anxiety. Her parents tried their hardest to keep her safe, but it was insufficient to keep her safe from the harsh facts of life. Pamela experienced horrors from an early age that no child should ever have to go through. She was mistreated by a babysitter when she was just 6 years old. 6 years later, tragedy struck once more when a friend's boyfriend's brother attacked her. The pain persisted by the time she started high school. She was also mistreated by her own lover and his pals. Deep psychological scars were left by these experiences, which frequently made Anderson feel as though she were sinking in a lonely abyss where no one was watching over her or listening to her. But eventually, a strong will began to emerge from that gloom. Sports became a way for Pamela to escape. Basketball, volleyball, and swimming. She was able to temporarily forget her dread and regain control over her body through these activities. Determined to start again, she left Ladysmith after high school and relocated to Vancouver. To make ends meet, she worked at a hair salon and as a fitness trainer. Anderson learned to stand on her own 2 feet throughout those challenging but essential years. The pivotal moment, entirely by accident, occurred in 1988. Pamela was sitting in the fans at a Canadian Football League game, sporting a cropped t-shirt bearing the Labatt Beer logo. Her picture flashed on the stadium's enormous screen after a videographer unintentionally caught the scene. Before long, a stranger's visage took center stage. In 1989, she received an immediate invitation to work as a model from the beer company. Anderson could not have predicted at the time that this chance encounter would lead to a completely new world. Playboy called shortly after and offered her a daring photo session. After Pamela Anderson was featured on the magazine's cover in October 1989, she quickly rose to fame. She was one of Playboy's most enduring and well-known models for years due to her stunning beauty, self-assured demeanor, and irresistible appeal. But celebrity wasn't the only thing Anderson cared about. She sought to be recognized as more than simply a provocative image in the entertainment industry, and it was her ticket in. Then came acting opportunities. She first appeared as a guest on Charles in Charge in 1990, then Married with Children and a number of other TV programs. Her casting as the Tool-Time Girl on Home Improvement in 1991 marked her true breakthrough. Her television career began with this part, which exposed her to a wider audience. When Anderson joined Baywatch in 1998, the show that made her a worldwide celebrity, it was the pinnacle, but her career success was accompanied by violent upheavals in her personal life. One of the most talked about romantic relationships in Hollywood was that between Anderson and Tommy Lee, the drummer for the Lee Crew. In 1994, they met at an awards ceremony, fell in love nearly immediately, and were married after just 2 weeks of courtship. Brandon and Dylan were the couple's 2 kids, but their joy was fleeting. Anderson accused Lee of abuse in November when he filed for divorce, and startling video footage later supported Anderson's claims. And that was by no means the last of the couple's many scandals. When an electrician hired to replace their wiring seized a sex video that captured intimate moments between Anderson and Lee from their house in 1995, they were once again the focus of media attention. Later, the tape was sold through a number of ways after being leaked online, making it one of the most well-known celebrity sex tapes ever. It was a huge controversy. Everyone seemed to want to watch Anderson's most private moments with her husband. The sex tape overshadowed her career and personal life, despite the fact that she continued to star on Baywatch and in movies, such as 1996's Barbed Wire. Anderson persisted, putting her kids first, and continued to work in spite of the issue, blaming Tommy Lee mostly. What Anderson ultimately disclosed in court was much more unsettling than the startling claims of emotional and physical abuse. Anderson does not express resentment when she thinks back on the 1998 incident, which finally ended her tumultuous marriage to Tommy Lee, but rather the weariness of someone who has been pushed well beyond her breaking point. She remembered Lee attacking her as she was holding their newborn in her arms during an uncontrollable, violent outburst. It was more than just a domestic assault. It was the realization that the boundary between life and death may be crossed in an instant. A mother's and her 2 children's safety was put in grave risk. However, the divorce was not the end of the horror. Anderson subsequently claimed that Lee persisted in actions that seriously damaged their son's mental health. She claimed that the boys were made to watch offensive movies, made to curse at their mother, and frequently came home in a panic. They begged to be returned to their father's home after experiencing nightmares night after night. Because of these indicators, Anderson was constantly afraid that the delicate minds of her kids were deteriorating. She saw this as a desperate scramble to shield her kids from unseen but permanent injuries rather than a conflict between 2 adults. The court finally awarded Anderson complete custody of her children following months of fierce legal disputes. It ought to have been a relief, but it appeared that fate would not be lenient. Anderson had to face yet another unpleasant reality in March 2002. Hepatitis C, a silent illness that gradually deteriorates the body and can cause potentially fatal complications, was what she had contracted. She said it started when she and Lee shared a tattoo needle during their notorious honeymoon tattoo session in 1996. Anderson initially opted for silence because she was fully aware of the harsh stigma society places on people who had the illness, not because she was ashamed. However, something forced her to enter the light despite her loneliness and anxiety. In order to become a voice for people who were suffering in silence, Anderson chose to share her tale, putting herself through criticism and scrutiny. In 2016, she shocked everyone by disclosing that physicians had once given her a terrifying prognosis. She may only have 10 years or so to live. Such revelation would have been a psychological death sentence for many. However, Anderson found it difficult. She relentlessly looked for hope in new medicines and refused to let fear dictate her life. After fighting nonstop for 15 years, a miracle at last came. Anderson finished a 12-week treatment of Sovaldi, an experimental medication that cost about $100,000. At last, the illness that had once threatened to kill her was forced into remission. However, fresh difficulties surfaced even as her health steadied. This time, it took the shape of legal and financial difficulties. Anderson was shocked once more in 2012 when her opulent Malibu home was taken by the U.S. government. After a contentious TMZ report disclosed that she had been charged with 2 tax levies, totaling more than $370,000 for the year 2011, the situation escalated. The pressure was increased by another from the Internal Revenue Service. Anderson immediately addressed those in the mirror, stating that she had not avoided paying taxes and that she was making an effort to clear up any confusion. However, the storm persisted. Her name was listed among the top 500 delinquent taxpayers in California a few years later. Her Malibu house was officially foreclosed upon when yet another hefty tax lien, this time for $1. $7 million was issued. This would have been the end for many. However, Anderson once again demonstrated that she was difficult to defeat. She gradually untangled her debts by carefully navigating the intricate legal maze with the assistance of her attorneys. By 2017, Anderson was able to effectively reclaim her lost home and pay off all associated debts. She may still owe about $1 million in taxes from past years, according to later accounts, but she never wavered in her resolve to face hardship head-on. The life of Pamela Anderson is hardly a happily ever after. It is a difficult story of a woman who was pushed to the brink time and time again by financial strain, assault, illness, and scandal. Her actual strength is revealed during those times when she rises. Not the limelight, but the refusal to allow tragedy to define her identity.